Canada flames out in the quarterfinals. Bobby McMann leads the Leafs past the Isles. And what stories define Toronto's 2024? This is the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Locked On Leafs podcast, a daily Maple Leaf-centric podcast hosted by myself, Mike DiStefano. My other co-host, Dave Morsuti, still out on vacation, and he'll be back next week. And then I will be gone for the week. Today's show brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $250 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. I may have done possibly one of the more unpatriotic things that I've done in a long time yesterday, but I felt so badly about Canada's chances at beating Czechia yesterday. I placed a wager on FanDuel at plus 270 for Czechia to win outright, the money line victory, and they did just that. We'll go through Canada's upsetting I was going to say upsetting loss, but really an upsetting tournament at the World Junior Championships. It was an awful, awful outing for the Canadians. We'll go through that. The Leafs with a victory last night. They beat the New York Islanders for the second time this season. They win the rubber match and win the season series 3-1 with a 2-1 victory last night. Bobby McMann was the star of the show, and that one, we'll go through that. And then I have a fun little segment at the end. Friday 5-pack. I like to do this some Fridays. And it's 5 stories that defines the Leafs in 2024. So we'll kind of take a look back at 2024 as a whole and to 5 stories that define the year, in my opinion. So we'll do that towards the end of the show. But let's start with Team Canada, because that's clearly the conversation at the water cooler today. For anyone who watched it, eliminated in the quarterfinals after a 4-3 loss to Czechia. It's back-to-back years that they've now been eliminated in the quarterfinals to Czechia. They're hoping to avenge last year's loss, and they did not. And it was the exact problem that plagued them through the entire tournament. Penalties, discipline. And they take a penalty late in the game, give Czechia an opportunity on the man advantage to break a 3-3 tie late in the third period, and that's exactly what Czechia did. They made it 4-3 with about 40 seconds to go on a penalty or on the power play. And Yeko scored. Nice little one-timer, beats the goaltender Carter George, and Canada unable to score in the final 40 seconds to tie it up and give them a chance to win out. And unfortunately, it's back-to-back years where Canada will not only medal, but won't play for a medal. And it's the first time in the history of the tournament that Canada will go 2 years in a row without even playing for a medal. The last time that medaled in 2 straight years was back in 1981, and now they won't even get a chance to medal. It's an embarrassment for Hockey Canada, and I feel for the kids. They're all very young, and they obviously tried their best, but I think Hockey Canada did not pick the correct team. I think it's obvious. I don't think it's a summit that Canada is a worse hockey nation than Latvia or than Czechia or than the Americans. I think they simply just didn't pick the right team, and they got some bad bounces, and they were fairly undisciplined, a very undisciplined group. They took so many penalties throughout the round robin. And then it was, of course, the penalty that killed them. And they took multiple penalties in the final game too, but the penalty that killed them, the dagger for Canada in the final 2 minutes there, really, it's poetic might not be the proper term to use, but the irony is definitely there that the team ended up losing based off of a power play goal that they gave up, given that that's been their Achilles heel all season long. But yeah, Canada, they battled back. They were down 3-1 after the first period. That goal was such a killer at the end of the period there to make it 3-1. They battled back, scored in the second, and then scored late in the third to tie the game up. It seemed like Canada had all the momentum, and then the penalty got in the way, and unable to win. And Czechia moves on to the medal round. Canada eliminated Dunzo. Easton Cowan ends up not a great tournament for Maple Leafs. Easton Cowan, I feel bad, for the kid. We were all looking forward to what he was going to be able to do, obviously, but I think he only ended up with like 1 point at the tournament, if I'm not mistaken. He did not show out very well. Not anything like he's been able to do when he was with London. Ended up with 1 goal. Yeah, sorry, 1 goal, not 1 point, but 1 goal, 2 assists. So 3 points in 5 games at the World Junior Championship. So he did not dominate, and it's kind of similar to last year. In 5 games, he had 1 goal, 1 assist for 2 points. This year, 1 goal, 2 assists for 3 points. So in the 10 games that he had in his World Junior Championship career, only 5 points for the Cowboy, Easton Cowan. But yeah, everyone was expecting a bigger tournament out of him, certainly in this city and with this fan base, but it wasn't the case. And it wasn't just him who did not play well and was undisciplined. There's a lot of guys that didn't give it, didn't. I don't want to say they didn't give it their best. They didn't show up. They certainly did, and they tried. They really did. But unfortunately, it just wasn't good enough. And they're heading home early, unfortunately, in Canada will not medal and won't have a chance to do it. I would imagine now this is probably the Americans' tournament to win. I think America and Sweden are the two teams that I would look at as the favorites at this point, but we'll see. But yeah, funny enough how all tournament long complain about the penalties and how the discipline and lack thereof has been a killer, and well, that's what sunk them at the end. It's kind of poetic in that way. All right. There was also a Leaf game ongoing at the exact same time, so it was tough for clicking, going back and forth. It's like patriotic or my team with the Maple Leafs. So I couldn't get it going, and it just kept going back and forth. It was fun though. But the Maple Leafs end up beating the Islanders last night, 2-1. It's their 4th straight win on the road, and it was really the Bobby McMann show, or as Joe Bowen is now calling him, Bobby McRocketman, who ended up with a couple of goals. And that third line still cooking. Like we talk about, the 3 stars of the game, like Bobby McMann and that third line, like that's your top star from last night. Bobby McMann ended up with both of the goals for Toronto. He had 6 shots on net. He ended up with a couple of hits. I thought he was fantastic. And the third line as a whole, again, continue to put waves of pressure on the opposition. They're playing a lot in the offensive zone, and they're hounding pucks. They're hungry on pucks, and they're putting shots on net. They outshot their opposition 8-2 last night between Bob McMahon, Max Domi, and Nick Robertson, when all 3 of those guys were out on the ice together. So that was the first star of the night. Obviously, you don't win that game if Bob McMahon doesn't score those goals, but you also don't win that game if Joseph Woll wasn't as good as he was, and he's my second star from the game last night. He stopped 32 at 33 stops, ended up with 2.16 goals save above expected. Toronto, they've been leaking a little bit of oil defensively, I will say, over the course of the last month or so, but good thing the goaltending has still been very good for Toronto. And Joseph Woll, despite in the last game, it looked like, is there something going on here? Is Joseph Woll possibly, is there an injury afoot? Because he was shaking out that knee or that groin, whatever it was, but gutted through it and then played well. Didn't look as though there was anything to be worried about in this game. He only gave up the 1 goal. That kind of a second goal late, but the whistle blew. No goal. So he only ended up giving up 1, and that was it, because the Leafs didn't give him any cushion. 2-1 final. He had 0 margin for error at that point. But he was great. So Joseph Woll got my second star. And I kind of like the Phil Myers and Morgan Riley pairing in that game also. I thought they played well as a pair. They had 77% expected goals with those two. They outshot the opposition 10-5. And it's not as though they're getting, prime matchups. Like they're out there, for a lot of defensive zone draws as well. It was 50-50 when it came to zone draws. 4 defensive zone, 4 offensive zone, couple in the neutral zone. So it's not as though they're being sheltered on the third pair. They're out there playing well. And Phil Myers ended up recording a game high 4 blocks in that game as well. So he's doing a lot to earn his money. And speaking of, a little bit of breaking news from earlier today, Phil Myers signing an extension with the Toronto Maple Leafs, a 2-year deal worth $850,000 annually. So Phil Myers gets a brand new deal, and he'll be a Maple Leaf for the next couple of years. It's kind of similar to, I guess, the Simon Benoit signing last season, where it's just kind of gone well. I think it's a good depth piece. I think in a perfect world, he's your 7th defenseman, and they can find someone better to play with Morgan Riley in the future. But right now, Myers is filling in decently, and he had a good game against the Islanders, although New York, not a very good squad. I mean, that's a bad team. It was kind of a low event game, and they don't have a whole lot of offense. So I think things could be better on that pairing, but Myers filling in okay, and he gets an extension with the Maple Leafs. And that's obviously 2 days after he became eligible to sign an extension with the club. So there could be more on the horizon, I would think, as well. All right, let's take a quick break. When we come back, I want to get to this Friday 5-pack, 5 stories that define the Leafs in 2024 before getting back to, some Leafs chats or some puck talks with another back-to-back coming up for Toronto. So get to all that and more today on the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your $5 bet wins. FanDuel has so many ways for you to pick up a W. You can bet on the money line, anytime goals, touchdown props, whatever you want to bet on. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Welcome back into the Locked On at Leafs podcast. Mike DiStefano here with you as we are each and every weekday, Monday through Friday on the Locked On Leafs podcast. Free and available wherever you get a podcast, and also up on YouTube as well. If you're enjoying the content, we ask for a little bit of appreciation. If you could subscribe to the show, hit the little notification bell as well, so you know exactly when we drop new episodes each and every day. Dave will be back next week for you guys. I will be taking the week off, sailing the 7 seas myself. So we kind of piggybacked cruises. He went with this week. I'll be on one next week. But I do want to quickly do a look back at 2024. I didn't do a proper look back earlier in the week. It was kind of a chaotic end to the week. I was working a lot at TSN on overdrive and whatnot. But, I thought this would be a good day, a Friday 5-pack, where we look at the 5 stories that define the Maple Leafs in 2024. And I'll start at number 5. And to me, a big storyline throughout 2024. And keep in mind, that's starting from January 2024 all the way through until December 31st of 2024. So not necessarily this season or last season, it's the calendar year. And to me, goaltending was a big story that defined 2024. I mean, last year you obviously had the injury to Matt Murray. He didn't play at all, but you go into this season with Ilya Samsonov and Joseph Woll as your two goaltenders, and both of those guys could hardly stay healthy. So goaltending health, and obviously Anthony Stolarz, then you got Woll in the playoffs, Woll at the start of the season. So goaltending health has been a massive storyline in the calendar year 2024. And then the mental wits of Ilya Samsonov as well, when that guy couldn't put his equipment on without allowing 6 or so goals. And then he fought himself back, came back to play, ended up being the starter in the playoffs. He was okay. They did go back to Woll, and then he got hurt, and then Samsonov had to step in again in Game 7, and he was fine. He gave them a chance to win that game. He certainly did. Obviously, we know what happened, though. But goaltending was just, and it always is here in Toronto, a massive storyline. But to me, it was the goaltending injuries and the health that really, really controlled a lot of the conversation within the calendar year. The fourth biggest story I think that defined 2024 was Nylander's mega extension. Like Nylander signing his deal, he was in the midst of a breakout kind of campaign, I guess, and he goes on to sign a big extension, 8-year deal, 11.5 million bucks. Way more than I think most people anticipated what it would look like at the beginning of the season. And then he started out so hot he ended up getting a contract in the midst of the hot streak, and it was a big, big number. And I would say he's somewhat lived up to it. He's still, among the league leaders in goals this year. It's always going to come down to two-way play and playoff success, ultimately, whether or not any of these guys are worth the money that they're being given. Sadly, it's always going to come down to that. But that was a big time move from Brad Treliving and from the Leafs. When he signed that extension, it definitely, I think, there was that was a big story, right? Nylander inked 8 years. He sticks around, and he's a Leaf throughout the duration of his entire prime. Another story. Well, how about another first round exit? And this is one that obviously has been a story for the last 20 years, except for 2022, I guess. But yeah, another first round exit to the Boston Bruins at that. Went to game 7, went to overtime, one shot away from putting that narrative to bed. But that shot came off the stick of David Pasternak instead of any of the Maple Leafs. And we got to talk about it now. Once again, another first round exit. This team together since in the Matthews Marner era, just one playoff round victory in that era, in the Shanaplan era. And it's always going to be a story until they make a run. Can that be this year? Can 2025 be the year? I don't know. You let me know down below if you think this team has what it takes to go on a lengthy run here this season in the Eastern Conference, maybe get to a Stanley Cup final, possibly win Canada's first cup in over 30 years and their own since 1967. Oh God, it's been so long since they've won a Stanley Cup. But another first round exit. It was certainly a big time story in 2024. And that really caused what another storyline to me was out goes Sheldon Keefe. In comes Coach Craig Berube. Sheldon Keefe getting fired was a big story, big deal. And then they brought in Craig Berube. Another big deal. I thought that was a massive storyline for 2024. Keefe had spent the last 5 years here. They've had a lot of regular season success, not much playoff success. They did win that one round against Tampa, but, outside of that, it just wasn't really good enough. And I know there was conversations of whether he lost the room. Is he the guy to get it done? Can he get it done in the playoffs? Does he outcoach himself at that point? Does his play style compute well in the playoffs? It didn't for the Maple Leafs. We'll see what happens with the New Jersey Devils. He's playing, he's got to playing really well right now. But in comes Craig Berube, who does know how to coach in the playoffs, who does have Stanley Cup pedigree when he was with the Blues a few years ago. So that was obviously a massive storyline. The coaching change in Toronto, different coach for the first time in 5 years, and a staggering difference between the coaching philosophies also, I think is what was, the big talking point there too. And you could see based on, the stats and the lack of goal scoring and the way that the team is built from the top down, that it's just completely different from Sheldon Keefe to Craig Berube. So that's clearly big. And then the number one storyline shouldn't really surprise anyone. It's Austin Matthews and his chase for 70 goals. That was the big story to me from the Maple Leafs from 2024. He went on an absolute tear there at the end, and it's so unfortunate that he came up just short. Big Bobby scores 69, and then he was done. He ended up playing game 82, had a chance, got the opportunity, but did not end up cashing in on number 70, unfortunately. And then the back half of 2024 for this guy has not been good, obviously. Injury plagued since being a 60-goal man. And that's kind of, unfortunate that last year, so great. One of the best seasons individually that we've seen in the NHL in decades, and it's followed up by an injury plagued year And we don't even know when we're going to see this guy on the ice. And when he does get on the ice, is he going to be at 100% or anything close to it? Lots of unknowns right now when it comes to Austin Matthews. But that certainly last year's chase to 70, that was the big story and such a fun thing to cover on a day-to-day basis here on the Locked On Leafs. And we were, covering it obviously over at TSN and Dave at Sportsnet and everybody in the NHL, really. It's the first time that we'd seen anybody score that many goals since in like 30 years. So it was awesome. It was a lot of fun to see. And again, just disappointing that it's been followed up by an injury riddled season and he's not even going to come close to getting to that number. He'll be lucky if he hits 30, honestly. And it's not for a lack of skill, obviously. It's is he going to play enough games to get there? How many games is he going to have in him? Is he going to be load managed, Kawhi Leonard style the rest of the way? Is he going to miss a good chunk, a month or two? There's been talk out there, not by the Maple Leafs, but there's been some talk in the ethos of, hey, let's just Kucherov the guy, let's Mark Stone the guy, put him on LTIR, bring him back in the playoffs, use that cap space to build out the roster, get a second line center, get a third line center, get another top dog defenseman, give yourself 13 million in cap space to work with, and then bring him back in the playoffs. That's been discussed as well. Not by the team, or at least hasn't been discussed publicly. I do want to make that very clear. But, Leafs Twitter is running rampant with that possibility. But I still would rather see Austin Matthews get back to 100% and play with this team as soon as possible because he is one of the best players to watch and one of the more fun players to watch. And look back the last couple of games, the Leafs hasn't been fun hockey, right? It really hasn't. It's been quite low event. And that's what happens when, 69 goal scorers are out of the lineup. Like Austin Matthews. But those were the 5 stories to me that define the Maple Leafs in 2024. Goaltending and its health, Nylander extension, another first-round exit, Sheldon Keefe fired, Craig Berube hired, and then Matthews chased for 70. That's the Friday 5-pack today. On the other side, the Leafs got a back-to-back this weekend, taking on Boston, then Philly. 2 rough and tumble teams. How will the Leafs fare? We'll talk about that next here on the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Today's episode brought to you by Rocket Money. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions that you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? That definitely happened to me. I had a few subscriptions that I didn't even realize that I was paying for, and Rocket Money made it so easy to track them down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps you lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even goals that you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all the app's premium features. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. Welcome back into the Locked On at Leafs podcast. Mike DiStefano and Dave Morsuti on vacation, but we'll be back next week. And then I am gone sailing the 7 seas. A little bon voyage for myself. But I'll be keeping track of what's going on with the Maple Leafs while I'm away. Don't you worry. I'll be keeping track. So when we get back, I'll have lots to say and lots to talk about. And you got a weekend back-to-back coming up. You got Boston and Philly both coming into Toronto. So no travel at least, but another back-to-back on the weekend. That's like 5 weekends in a row that this team has had to play back-to-back games. It's actually insane. And it started to piss me off, I'll be honest with you, because it's so much hockey in such a short stretch. And it's not as though, I know that there is, I believe one other team has 16 back-to-backs this season as well. Might be the Anaheim Ducks. But when you think about a team like the Winnipeg Jets, they only have 8 back-to-backs. There's a competitive disadvantage that the Maple Leafs have with the way the schedule has definitely lined up for them this year. And I don't know. I think it's outrageous and ludicrous that they've had 5 weekends in a row here pretty much, where it's been a back-to-back each and every weekend. Kind of outrageous if you ask me. But they've got Boston and Philly coming into town. Probably not going to see Austin Matthews. I'll be honest. Does not appear like he's ready to go, because I think they're going to want to make sure he gets a couple of full practices in. And based on how the schedule's going, because they got tons of games coming up, and then they don't practice after a back-to-back, and they got another game the following night, probably not going to see him for the next 3, maybe 4 games at the very least. So yeah, it's really unfortunate, the situation with Austin Matthews, where we just don't know where we're at, and then the schedule is so condensed that he's not getting practice time with the team that could help give him more of an assurance that he's healthy and good to go. But not probably going to play this weekend. The question is, who's going to play a net on the second half of the back-to-backs? Going to be Dennis Hildeby or Matt Murray? I mean, they've pretty much been given Hildeby backup duties, but then when they need someone to start, like on these back half of the back-to-backs, they usually end up doing sending Hildeby down and bringing up Matt Murray. But Murray did not look good in his last game, so I do wonder if maybe they do give Hildeby an opportunity to play at this point. But we'll see. But that's something that I think is definitely going to be interesting. But the game against Boston is going to be important, because Boston, although they started out not great, and it still doesn't look awesome for the Bruins. The goaltending has still been kind of suspect out of Jeremy Swayman. I mean, we are looking at a team that's not too far off from Toronto anymore when it comes to the standings. It's a 6-point gap. Boston's moved into third in the Atlantic. Toronto currently 2 points above the Florida Panthers for first place now. But those divisional points always mean something. So that's going to be an important matchup for Toronto, and they've kind of slipped a little bit on home ice. I will say that they've lost a couple of games here of late on home ice. So it's nice they're finally winning games on the road, 4 in a row on the road. But I think they've lost like 4 of the last 5 or 3 of the last 5 games on home ice now. So it's everything evens out in the wash, I suppose. But they've got to make sure that they pick up the first couple of points against Boston, a divisional opponent, and not let them bring it to within 4 points of them. Because Boston, if they can get rolling, that's a team to obviously watch. So yeah, that's going to be a big game. And then the Philadelphia Flyers, chance to see Matvei Michkov, which I'm excited. So I guess I'd say Michkov is probably going to be the locked on player to watch from the Philadelphia Flyers. That'll be on night 2. And he's a kid who's just having an unbelievable season. I mean, we're talking about someone who is only 20 years old, but the season that he's having is outrageous. I mean, he's got 12 goals, 17 points, 12 goals, 17 assists, 29 points so far through 37 games. So he's been real solid for Philadelphia. But that's a team that's kind of starting to fade a little bit. They don't really have great goaltending either. So it's a game Toronto should be able to win. But on night 2 with back-to-back, depending who the goaltender is, I don't know. We'll see what ends up happening. But that's going to do it for me here today on the podcast. I'd like to thank you all for listening and supporting the show. You could subscribe to the Locked On Leafs podcast on all platforms and receive daily Leafs content. Follow myself on Twitter at Mickey_Canuck. Follow the show at Locked On Leafs. Dave will be back with you guys with another episode on Monday. Enjoy the games this weekend, folks. Until then, keep it locked right here on Locked On Leafs.